Welcome back to the suttas. This one I'm going to talk about Sabbasava Sutta, which is all the fermentations. I have heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying at Sabbasava in Jeddah's Grove, monastery. There he addressed the monks. Monks. Yes, Lord, the monks replied. The Blessed One said, monks, the ending of the fermentation is for one who knows and sees. I tell you, not for one who doesn't know and doesn't see. For one who knows what and sees what. Appropriate attention and inappropriate attention. When a monk attends inappropriately, unarisen fermentations arise and arisen fermentations increase. When a monk attends appropriately, unarisen fermentations do not arise and arisen fermentations are abandoned. There are fermentations to be abandoned by seeing, those to be abandoned by restraining, those to be abandoned by using, those to be abandoned by tolerating, those to be abandoned by avoiding, those to be abandoned by destroying, and those to be abandoned by developing. And what are the fermentations to be abandoned by seeing? There is the case where an ordinary, uninstructed person who has no regard for noble ones, is not well versed or disciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for men of integrity, is not well versed or disciplined in their Dhamma, does not discern what ideas are fit for attention or what ideas are unfit for attention. This being so, he does not attend to ideas fit for attention and attends instead to ideas unfit for attention. And what ideas unfit for attention that he attends to? Whatever ideas such that when he attends to them, the unarisen fermentation of sensuality arises in him, and the arisen fermentation of sensuality increases. The unarisen fermentation of becoming arises in him, and the arisen fermentation of becoming increases. The unarisen fermentation of ignorance arises in him, and the arisen fermentation of ignorance increases. These are the ideas unfit for attention that he attends to. And what are the ideas fit for attention that he does not attend to? Whatever ideas such that when he attends to them, the unarisen fermentation of sensuality does not arise in him, and the arisen fermentation of sensuality is abandoned. The unarisen fermentation of becoming does not arise in him, and fermentation of ignorance does not arise in him, and the arisen fermentation of ignorance is abandoned. These are the ideas fit for attention that he does not attend to. Through his attending to ideas unfit for attention and through his not attending to ideas fit for attention, both unarisen fermentations arise in him and arisen fermentations increase. This is how he attends inappropriately. Was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? What was I in the past? Shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Having been what shall I be in the future? Or else he is inwardly perplexed about the immediate present. Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this been coming from? Where is this bound? As he attends inappropriately in this way, one of 6 kinds of views arises in him. The view, I have a self, arises in him as true and established, or the view, I have no self, or the view, it is precisely by the means of self that I perceive self, or the view, it is precisely by the means of self that I perceive not self, or the view, it is precisely by the means of not self that I perceive self, arises in him as true and established. Or else he has a view like this. This very self of mine, the knower that is sensitive here and there to the ripening of good and bad actions, is the self of mine that is constant, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and will stay just as it is for eternity. This is called a thicket of views, a wilderness of views, a contortion of views, a writhing of views, a fetter of views. Bound by a fetter of views, the ordinary uninstructed person is not freed from birth, aging, and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair. He is not freed, I tell you, from suffering and stress. The well-instructed disciple of the Noble Ones, who has regard for the Noble Ones, is well-versed and disciplined in their regard for the Noble Ones. Who has regard for men of integrity, well-versed and disciplined in their Dhamma, discerns what ideas are fit for attention and what ideas are unfit for attention. This being so, he does not attend to ideas unfit for attention and attends instead to ideas fit for attention. And what are the ideas unfit for attention that he does not attend to? Whatever ideas such that, when he attends to them, the unarisen fermentation of sensuality arises in him, and the arisen fermentation of sensuality increases. The unarisen fermentation of becoming arises in him, and the arisen fermentation of becoming increases. The unarisen fermentation of ignorance arises in him, and the arisen fermentation of ignorance increases. These are the ideas unfit for attention that he does not attend to. And what are the ideas fit for attention that he does attend to? Whatever ideas such that, when he attends to them, the unarisen fermentation of sensuality does not arise in him, and the arisen fermentation of sensuality is abandoned. The unarisen fermentation of becoming does not arise in him, and the arisen fermentation of becoming is abandoned. The unarisen fermentation of ignorance does not arise in him, and the arisen fermentation of ignorance is abandoned. These are the ideas fit for attention that he does attend to. Though through his not attending to ideas unfit for attention, and through his attending to ideas fit for attention, unarisen fermentations do not arise in him, and arisen fermentations are abandoned. He attends appropriately. This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. This is the way leading to the cessation of stress. He attends appropriately in this way. 3 fetters are abandoned in him. identity view, doubt, and grasping at precepts and practices. These are called fermentations to be abandoned by seeing. And what are the fermentations abandoned by restraining? There is the case where a monk reflecting appropriately dwells restrained in the restraint of the I faculty, the fermentations, vexation, or fever that would arise if he were to dwell unrestrained with the restraint of the I faculty does not arise for him when he dwells restrained with the restraint of the I faculty. Reflecting appropriately, he dwells restrained with the restraint of the ear faculty. Reflecting appropriately, he dwells restrained with the restraint of the nose faculty. Reflecting appropriately, he dwells restrained with the restraint of the tongue faculty. Reflecting appropriately, he dwells restrained with the restraint of the body faculty. Reflecting appropriately, he dwells restrained with the restraint of the intellect faculty. The fermentations, vexations, or fever that would arise if he were to dwell unrestrained with the restraint of the intellect faculty do not arise for him when he dwells restrained with the restraint of the intellect faculty. These are called the fermentations to be abandoned by restraining. And what are the fermentations to be abandoned by using? There is a case where a monk reflecting appropriately uses the robe simply to counteract cold, to counteract heat, to counteract the touch of flies, mosquito, wind, sun, and reptiles, simply for the purpose of covering the parts of the body that cause shame. Reflecting appropriately, he uses alms food, not playfully, nor for intoxication, nor for putting on bulk, nor for beautification, but simply for the survival and continuance of this body, for ending its afflictions, for the support of the holy life, thinking, thus I will destroy old feelings of hunger and not create new feelings from overeating. I will maintain myself, be blameless, and live in comfort. Reflecting appropriately, he uses lodging to simply counteract cold, to counteract heat, to counteract the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and reptiles, simply for protection from the inclemencies of weather and for the enjoyment of seclusion. Reflecting appropriately, he uses medicinal requisites that are used for curing the sick simply to counteract any pains of illness that have arisen and for maximum freedom from disease. The fermentations, vexation, or fever that would arise if he were not to use these things in this way do not arise for him when he uses them in this way. These are called fermentations to be abandoned by using. And what are the fermentations to be abandoned by tolerating? There is a case where a monk, reflecting appropriately, endures. He tolerates cold, heat, hunger, and thirst, the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and reptiles, ill-spoken, unwelcome words and bodily feelings that, when they arise, are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, displeasing, and menacing to life. The fermentations, vexation, or fever that would arise if he were not to tolerate these things do not arise for him when he tolerates them. These are called the fermentations to be abandoned by tolerating. And what are the fermentations to be abandoned by avoiding? There is the case where the monk, reflecting appropriately, avoids a wild elephant, a wild horse, a wild bull, a wild dog, a snake, a stump, a bramble patch, a chasm, a cliff, a cesspool, an open sewer. Reflecting appropriately, he avoids sitting in the sorts of unsuitable seats, wandering to the sorts of unsuitable habits, and associating with the sorts of bad friends that would make his knowledgeable friends in the holy life suspect him of evil conduct. The fermentations, vexation, or fever that would arise if he were not to avoid these things do not arise for him when he avoids them. These are called fermentations to be abandoned by avoiding. And what? Fermentations to be abandoned by destroying? There is a case where a monk, reflecting appropriately, does not tolerate an arisen thought of sensuality. He abandons it, destroys it, dispels it, and wipes it out of existence. Reflecting appropriately, he does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will. Reflecting appropriately, he does not tolerate an arisen thought of cruelty. Reflecting appropriately, he does not tolerate arisen evil, unskillful mental qualities. He abandons them, destroys them, dispels them, and wipes them out of existence. The fermentations, vexation, or fever that would arise if he were not to destroy these things do not arise for him when he destroys them. These are all called fermentations to be abandoned by destroying. And what fermentations are developed by, and what are the fermentations to be abandoned by developing? There is a case where a monk, reflecting appropriately, develops mindfulness as a factor for awakening dependent on seclusion, dispassion, cessation, resulting in letting go. He develops analysis of qualities as a factor for awakening, persistence as a factor for awakening, rapture as a factor for awakening, serenity as a factor for awakening, concentration as a factor for awakening, equanimity as a factor for awakening dependent on seclusion, dispassion, cessation, resulting in letting go. The fermentations, vexation, or fever that would arise if he were not to develop these qualities do not arise for him when he develops them. These are called fermentations to be abandoned by developing. When a monk's fermentations that should be abandoned by seeing have been abandoned by seeing, his fermentations then should be abandoned by restraining, have been abandoned by restraining. His fermentations that should be abandoned by using, have been abandoned by using. His fermentations that should be abandoned by tolerating, have been abandoned by tolerating. His fermentations that should be abandoned by avoiding, have been abandoned by avoiding. His fermentations that should have been abandoned by destroying, have been abandoned by destroying. His fermentations that should be abandoned by developing, have been abandoned by developing. Then he is called a monk who dwells restrained with the restraint of all fermentations. He has severed craving, thrown off the fetters, and through right penetration of conceit, has made an ending to suffering and stress. That is what the Blessed One said. Gratified, the monks delighted in the Blessed One's words. So ends all the fermentations. monastery, then Jansoni, the Brahmin, went with Blessed One and, on arrival, exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, Master Gautama, the sons of good families who have gone forth from the home life to the homelessness out of conviction to the Mass in Master Gautama. Is Master Gautama their leader? Is Master Gautama their helper? Is Master Gautama their inspirer? Do they take Master Gautama as their example? Yes, Brahman, it is so. The sons of good families who have gone forth from the home life into homelessness out of conviction for me, I am their leader, I am their helper, I am their inspirer. They take me as their example. But Master Gautama, it is not easy to endure isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. It is not easy to maintain seclusion, nor easy to be alone. The forests, as it were, plunder the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. Yes, Brahman, so it is. It's not easy to endure isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. It's not easy to maintain seclusion, not easy to enjoy being alone. The forests, as it were, plunder the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. Before my awakening, when I was still unawakened, the thought occurred to me as well. It's not easy to maintain seclusion, not easy to enjoy being alone. The forests, as it were, plunder the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. The thought occurred to me when priests or contemplatives who are unpurified in their bodily activities resort to isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. It's the fault of their unpurified bodily activities that they give rise to unskillful fear and terror. But it's not the case that I am unpurified in my bodily activities, and when I resort to isolated forest or wilderness dwellings, I am purified in my bodily activities. I am one of those noble ones who are purified in their bodily activities when I resort to isolated forests or wilderness dwellings. Seeing in myself this purity of bodily activities, I felt even more undaunted about staying in the wilderness. The thought occurred to me when priests or contemplatives were unpurified in their verbal activities, unpurified in their mental activities, unpurified in their livelihood, resort to isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. It's the fault of their unpurified livelihood that they give rise to unskillful fear and terror. But it's not the case that I am unpurified in my livelihood when I resort to isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. I am purified in my livelihood. I am one of those noble ones who are purified in their livelihood when they resort to isolated forests or wilderness dwellings. Seeing in myself this purity of livelihood, I felt even more undaunted about staying in the wilderness. The thought occurred to me when priests or contemplatives who are covetous and fiercely passionate for sensuality, I am not covetous. When priests or contemplatives who have minds of ill will with destructive attitudes, I have mind of goodwill. When priests or contemplatives who are overcome by sloth and drowsiness, I am devoid of sloth and drowsiness. When priests or contemplatives who are restless and with an unstilled mind, I have a stilled mind. When priests or contemplatives who are uncertain and doubting, I have gone beyond uncertainty. When priests or contemplatives who tend to praise themselves and disparage others. I do not praise myself or disparage others. When priests or contemplatives who tend towards panic and dread, I have gone beyond horripilation. When priests or contemplatives who are desirous of gain, offerings, and fame, I am modest. When priests or contemplatives who are lazy and lacking in persistence, my persistence is aroused. When priests or contemplatives who are muddled in their mindfulness and unalert, I have mindfulness established. When priests or contemplatives who are unconcentrated with straying minds, I am consummate in concentration. The thought occurred to me, when priests or contemplatives who are drooling idiots resort to isolated forests or wilderness dwellings, it's the fault of their drooling idiocy that gives rise to unskillful fear and terror, but it's not the case that I am a drooling idiot when I resort to isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. I am consummate in discernment. I am one of those noble ones who are consummate in discernment, and when they resort to isolated forests or wilderness dwellings, seeing this in myself, this consummate discernment, I felt even more undaunted about staying in the wilderness. The thought occurred to me, what if, on recognized designated nights such as the 8th, 14th, and 15th of the lunar fortnight, I were to stay in the sorts of places that were awe-inspiring and make your hair stand on end, such as park shrines, forest shrines, and tree shrines. Perhaps I would get to see that fear and terror. So, at a later time, on recognized designated nights such as the 8th, 14th, 15th, and on a lunar fortnight, I stayed in the sorts of places that are awe-inspiring and make your hair stand on end, such as park shrines and forest shrines and tree shrines. While I was staying there, a wild animal would come and a bird would drop a twig and the wind would rustle with the fallen leaves. The thought would occur to me, is this that fear and terror coming? Then the thought occurred to me, why do I just keep waiting for fear? What if I were to subdue fear and terror in whatever state they come? So, when fear and terror came while I was walking back and forth, I would not stand or sit or lie down. I would keep walking back and forth until I had subdued that fear and terror. When fear and terror came back while I was standing, I would not walk or sit or lie down. I would keep standing until I had subdued that fear and terror. When fear and terror came while I was sitting, I would not lie down or stand up or walk. I would keep sitting until I had subdued that fear and terror. When fear and terror came while I was lying down, I would not sit up or stand or walk. I would keep lying down until I had subdued that fear and terror. There are some priests and contemplatives, Brahmin, who have the perception of day when it is night and night when it's day. This, I tell you, is their being in a dwelling of delusion. For me, I have the perception of day when it is day and night when it is night. And if anyone, when speaking rightly, were to say a being not subject to delusion has appeared in the world for the benefit of happiness of many, out of sympathy for the world, for welfare, benefit, and happiness of human and divine beings, he would rightly be speaking to me. Unflagging persistence was aroused in me, and unmuddled mindfulness established. My body was calm and unaroused, my mind concentrated and single, quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from from unskillful mental qualities, I entered and remained in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born from me, from withdrawal, accompanied by direct thought and evaluation. With the stilling of directed thought and evaluation, I entered and remained in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of composure, unification of awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. With the fading of rapture, I remained in equanimity, mindful and alert, and physically sensitive of pleasure. I entered and remained in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare equanimous and mindful. He has a pleasurable abiding. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, I entered and remained in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed to the knowledge of recollecting my past lives. I recollected my manifold past lives, i.e., 1 birth, 2, 5, 10, 50, 100,000, 100,000, many eons of cosmic contraction, many eons of cosmic expansion, many eons of cosmic contraction and expansion. There I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance. Such was my food, such was my experience of pleasure and pain, such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose there. There too, I had such a name, belonged to such a clan, had such an appearance, such was my food, such was my experience in pleasure and pain, such the end of my life. Passing away from that state, I re-arose here. Thus I recollected my manifold past lives and their modes and details. This was the first knowledge I attained. In the first watch of the night, ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose, darkness destroyed, light arose, as happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of passing away and reappearance of beings. I saw, by means of divine eye, purified and surpassing the human. Beings passing away and reappearing, and I discerned how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. These beings who were endowed with bad conduct of body, speech, and mind, who reviled noble ones, held wrong views, and undertook actions under the influence of wrong views, with the breakup of the body after death, have reappeared in the plane of deprivation, the bad destination, the lower realms, in hell. But those beings who were endowed with good conduct of body and speech and mind, who did not revile noble ones, who held right views and undertook actions under the influence of right views, with the breakup of the body after death, have reappeared in the good destinations, in the heavenly world. Thus, by means of the divine eye, purified and surpassing the human, I saw beings passing away and reappearing, and I discerned how they are inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, in accordance with their karma. This was the second knowledge I attained in the second watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose. Darkness was destroyed, light arose. As happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. When the mind was thus concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilement, pliant, malleable, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of ending of the mental fermentations. I discerned, as it was actually present, that this is stress, this is the origination of stress, this is the cessation of stress, this is the way leading to the cessation of stress. These are fermentations. This is the origination of fermentations. This is the cessation of fermentations. This is the way leading to the cessation of fermentations. My heart, thus knowing, thus seeing, was released from the fermentation of sensuality, released from the fermentation of becoming, released from the fermentation of ignorance. With release, there was knowledge. Released, I discerned that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, task done. There is nothing further in this world. This was the third knowledge that I attained on the third watch of the night. Ignorance was destroyed, knowledge arose. Darkness was destroyed, light arose, as happens in one who is heedful, ardent, and resolute. Now, Brahman, if the thought should occur to you, perhaps Gautama in the contemplative is even today not free of passion, not free of aversion, not free of delusion, which is why he resorts to isolated forest and wilderness dwellings. It should not be seen that way. It's through seeing two compelling reasons that I resort to isolated forest and wilderness dwellings, seeing a pleasant abiding for myself in the present, and feeling sympathy for future generations. How truly future generations have been shown sympathy by Master Gautama, as by one who is worthy and rightly self-awakened. Magnificent Master Gautama, magnificent, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp in the dark, so that those with eyes could see forms in the same way as Master Gautama, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dharma so clear. I go to Master Gautama for refuge, to the Dharma and to Sangha of monks. May Master Gautama remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge from this day forward for life. And that ends the talk on fear and terror. And thank you for being with me. In the next video, I will be doing something a little sweeter called the ball of honey. And so I'm going to end this with, have a wonderful day. Namaste.